All right, folks, this is part 2 of the Anthony Mao interview 2 years after the first interview. And so this was a very unique situation in that he had a very set, limited amount of time while I was actually there. And so the only time we could do the interview was when he was actually closing the clamshells for the day's deliveries. So with that, not ideal, but it's also not as bad as I'm going to make it sound. But there is some clamshell snapping here and there throughout the interview. So I recommend that you don't listen to this through earphones. I've taken all the audio down as much as possible during those clicks, but you still hear it. And it's one of those things where you have to understand, when farmers make time for us when they visit, it's a give and take, and it's almost, you need to be there when he's actually doing the job. So if you're interested in farming, being exposed to those kinds of sounds and the noises and the wind and everything that was going on is really the most authentic thing we could ever possibly bring to you. We try to make the videos as best as we can, and this was broad daylight. It was super windy that day. And like I said, just a little bit of operation, but the lessons you're going to learn as we've gone from video 1, which is his operation year 2 and 3, to now year 5, as they bought a whole entire second farm on the other side of the island and listening to a much different conversation of scaling up and things that you need to think about as a growing farmer. It's priceless. So please enjoy.
All right. Okay. Welcome back to Kupu Place, located in Honolulu, Hawaii. So the last time you were here, about 2 years ago, we've done quite a bit of work to scale up our business. Focus has been to get to another location. So, whether that's purchasing a farm, leasing a farm, we looked at it all the options, and we figured the best option for us and the best option for most people in Hawaii, if you can swing it, is to own your farm. So fortunately, through a lot of hard work and dedication, as you've said, we found a way to put an offer down on a property that we thought we had no hope for. And we wrote a really darn good letter about what we plan to do with the farm and how we plan to contribute to Hawaii's food security and food production. And the owner, thank God, was listening to what we were saying and didn't take the highest offer, which there were 2 other higher offers than ours. And we were going over asking to begin with, and he asked, how much over would you go? And we said a price that was almost too much, we couldn't afford. And then he came back with we want you to buy the farm. And he brought the price back down.
Oh,
so
that's
he
nice.
was just seeing what I think the commitment level was for us, and ultimately made a decision with his family, and the family wanted us to be on the land because we had multiple businesses that would be on the land, and we're young farmers, so they wanted to give that opportunity to us. So that's the really cool part.
Going back to our first visit, a lot of the talk was how much agriculture has gone away from Hawaii and now how it's trying to come back for so many people, where you just have this influx of mainlanders coming in to visit, to return that back to its proper space. And then the space of where you're at is surrounded by little pockets of ag as well. So it's great for them to recognize the opportunity that they had to be a part of it without actually having to get their hands dirty to speak.
Right. It's a constant flux and a constant battle in Hawaii and around the world. Development for living spaces, development for tourism activities, or development in the agriculture space. And ironically, as the human population increases globally, but also on the island, we're really battling for the resources that we need to survive. And one of the problems in Hawaii is that we're allowing for more development to happen when we've already recognized that we're not sustainable. We're still importing 90% of our food, really. And beyond that, we're increasing the housing in Honolulu, which doesn't make any sense. Honolulu's then expanded to places like where we're farming. And most of those ag lots have been turned into residential areas. We're one of the few people even in that entire valley that's producing food, and that is a production site. It is an agricultural site. So yes, we are still in the process of reclaiming land, as we mentioned in the first video, via urbanized aquaponics and microgreen production. But really the goal is to get to a footprint that can actually have an impact. Whereas the initial setup here was more to prove our business concept and make sure that, you know, we had our I's dotted and T's crossed and knew what we were getting into. And yeah, so it's been a really good process for us to learn the ins and outs of our business and then make that conscious decision that what we have is good and sound, from the science to the practicality of it, to the markets, and ultimately to the community and what they want to see and have as a product, which is food.
Well, and the other thing that had to help that guy's decision to, and that family's decision to keep it with you, is the 4-year proof of concept here where we're currently filming this at. We'll get to the other location here in a minute and the details of it, but you weren't just a new farmer going, hey, we have this big dream and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but we don't have anything to back it up. You had clients, you had people buying from you at the market at the time. I mean, you already had a raving fan base and had proved out that you could do what you said you're setting out to do.
Yeah, and that's the homework that I was kind of alluding to in the 2 years since we last were talking. It really comes down to all of the above that you just mentioned. If you want to scale your business, you want to scale it organically. A lot of businesses have come in here, really large corporate bodies of agriculture, establishing, you know, indoor farms, large scale farms in Hawaii, and those farms ultimately fizzling out. And I think we've seen that across the country.
Right.
There's big farms that they're pushing the boundaries of what we can do scientifically, production wise, but at the same time they're not viable businesses. They're extremely in debt, and in the end they're folding. So if a business isn't sustainable, should we be supporting it? Well, when you look at your own small business, if you can say that you can support yourself, that's great. But what we didn't want to become was somebody that would take on such a big footprint and such a big project all at once and then end up folding in a year. So we went with the organic model, but with the organic model, lining up the markets first, you know, as a larger producer would anyway, but really honing in on the markets first, making sure that once you're producing, that you're going to be able to offload that product. That's the key. And so we've done that. We've partnered with a couple of the larger distributors, which, you know, at the time we didn't want to talk to because there's no way we could service them. With the scale that we wanted to get to, which we're working on getting to right now, distribution looks differently. So going from what's more of a direct-to-consumer market, restaurant market, we went to a wholesale market. We restructured our price points, our catalogs, to give to our partners, where if you're buying a certain volume, you get that wholesale price. And we know that we have to reduce our price point for our microgreens with the volume increasing. But it's that give or take. And it's also in our model, that ratio of direct to consumer retail pricing and wholesale pricing in our model isn't, you know, 75-25. Right now it's more 50-50. So we have a really good revenue stream from the direct to consumer market still. And that's actually how we pay our bills. Now, when we get to 3, 4, 5 times the footprint of what we're doing even now, that's when the wholesale ratio will swing into favor of the wholesale market. And at that point, it's just a volume game, and we'll be a different producer.
So you haven't been in the new space, for about 6 months. Here, it's super tight. We're going to show it as far as the production and how much you're able to get out of such a small space. Now you have room to grow for quite some time. And the property itself kind of struck me in several ways. And the first one I want to talk about is your wash pack station.
Yes.
Super new. I think you've done it in a way that you can expand on it pretty infinitely for quite some time. And I don't think that would have happened had you not been here in such a confined space, limited resources, limited utilities. Like, you really set it up right, which again comes with experience.
Yeah, so the wash pack was something that we're definitely most excited about, as you would be too. As a producer, you're so focused on, your in-field and growing systems to start, but in the end, you realize it's all about the food safety and the post-harvest processing and the marketability of your work and the cleanliness of your work. And so that helps us to really just be the ultimate producer from that standpoint. And when we partner with folks that really need to have that assurance that the quality is going to be there, again, with the food safety side too, you look at that facility and you know that it's clean. You know that it's a space that we're flowing with efficiency. It's climate controlled. It's not bound by space as far as when we work in there. We're not hitting the walls like this, like we are here. So it's exciting, and that took the bulk of our investment up front for sure.
How are you guys handling being in two different locations as far as the transport of, like, let's say I know you bought a bunch of compost here last week.
Yeah.
Where does it get delivered to? Then how does it get to the second location?
Yeah, it's a good.
Now you have a harvest, and do they need to be consolidated before they get delivered?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've gone back and forth as far as like what site we want to distribute out of, where we're dropping the materials, the inventory, and ultimately the inventory is all getting dropped at the new farm site. It's just a lot more space, a lot of storage. It's freed up movement in here, whereas we were getting a little bit confined with what we were doing in here. We were packing ourselves in with all the boxes and this and that. So moving the product out there was really good for here. And then out there, we're going to be packing all the orders, because again, that's that wash pack zone is really nice to be able to work in. So we're packing all the orders out there, and then we're going to move that product to town into the different restaurants and our wholesalers. So if we're harvesting today on a Friday, this lettuce gets put in the fridge here, but eventually gets moved out there, boxed up, and shipped from there. We're keeping our delivery vehicles out there. We're keeping everything out there. One less step in the food process and paperwork chain too, with having certain steps be out there. So we can just focus on growing here. That's been tricky though. It's not perfect. Moving product between spaces
or containers
is challenging. And so like we're constantly talking and communicating, and that's the number one thing, is communication within our team. The dialogue on our texts are just blowing up all day nonstop, and I'm sure we'll get better at it. It's going to be a better system.
Dude, I mean, I think about Bootstrap and the back and forth that goes between all the different teams and the warehouse and everything. It's a constant evolution of systems, working that system, allowing it to show where it's lacking,
right,
coming up with a new one, not beating yourself up along the way as it happens as well.
Right. So giving ourselves that flexibility right now is good. We've had heated arguments about things between ourselves because,
as you should,
some people think it should be one way, some people think it should be another way. And ultimately what's funny is it's never one side is right. It's always a blend of one person's perspective and another's perspective, and then on business types of things. And at the end of the day, like, you can lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing, but you can also choose to jump in, be part of the labor, and that brings a lot of joy for us farmers. So, yesterday seeding microgreens is something that I enjoyed doing for that day, because that entire morning I was writing loan applications and figuring out what grants I could apply to and making a bunch of phone calls. They're all adding to my baseline stress. So it's good to balance it out. And even doing the lettuce and working with our intern has been really good. I'm gonna go drop this to the fridge.
Yeah. So I have noticed that the volume has certainly increased, but you're still leaning into what you guys were really honing in the last time I was here. Heads of lettuce, microgreens, cut flowers. Talked a little bit yesterday about all the room that you're going to have moving forward, but you're still going to lean into what you know best. And really, you've carved out such a niche. You have everything set. Now it's just a matter of more refining as you scale up without having to reinvent the wheel every single time.
Yeah. So the cool part about this whole operation is that as we went to the other side, we started working with, I guess, our new system out there for growing microgreens, which in the end was the best version of a microgreen facility that we could think of, that fit our budget and fit, kind of the bootstrap model, which is working with what you got. The island is, it's expensive to operate in. And with moving out there, it provided a really cool opportunity to look into our methodologies again and contrast. There's 2 different geographic locations, 2 different subtle microclimates, 2 different systems. One's single plane and one's vertical.
I want to elaborate on that just a little bit, because I don't, until you visit here, you don't really understand how big of a difference that can be. So right now where we're filming this currently today, on the northern part of the freeway of where that kind of dissects Honolulu east and west. And then on the other side of the mountain, like a whole mountain, is the other farm that's much wetter, much windier, even though the winds seem to funnel through here a little different. As far as a microclimate, I mean, if you're in the States, from what I can tell and what I've seen in my 2 times of being here and traveling all over the place, I mean, it's the difference between a couple of states,
right?
And it's rather significant.
Right.
So when you do talk about microclimates, yeah, you do have a proof of concept here, but it is a whole lot of relearning, even though that learning has to be quite accelerated.
I mean, it's growing outside, especially you're paying attention to, even if you have a roof over your greens, the humidity levels, the temperatures, and everything that may impact your germination, which you saw. We had some bad germination when you came weeks prior.
I only go to farms whenever they're having a big issue. That's it. That's the only time I ever show up.
The weeks prior were firing. It's like as epic of production as we've ever had. And so when you go from 1 week there being pristine, nice, breezy, cool, crisp weather to super hot, muggy, and then you throw in the variable of like get the wrong media and start working with the wrong products and you catch it too late, it can totally flip-flop. And so the years of experience in this zone and then now working out there hopefully will help to stabilize what we do on a consistency level. And I think we're going to be more consistent. We've shown that in this zone, we've been way more consistent. We used to not be able to grow things like red vein sorrel, lemon balm, you name it. We're in the same zone and we're able to grow these varieties consistently year round. So since we've left, that's kind of the cool part, is like we left you where we just started to get into a flow and the space was filled out in terms of our footprint, but we didn't quite master growing in this zone. And now that we've been 2 more years in the making, everything that we've done, we know where varieties need to be within this space, within the microclimates of the microclimate here that our system kind of presents. And we filled out our racks every week. And I think that's what's allowed our business to grow, is just the consistency of producing. And folks that grow indoor, you're probably laughing like, okay, well, this is why we grow indoors. But there's a lot of advantages of growing outdoors. In Hawaii, it's the single most important decision because electricity costs are so high. But there's also the advantage of, if you look at our quality, our shelf life of our products, it's it's like incomparable to our competitors. And the stem thickness and the hardiness of our greens are just on another level because of the natural ambient light and exposure to the wind and everything like that. So
Well, and year round, the temperature is pretty consistent.
yes, so that's the cool part is like Hawaii is a dream for growing because you've got that 65 to 75 degree weather all year round. Even right now, I said it was really hot, but let's be real, last night was 72 degrees, so sleeping was really nice. That means our greens are sleeping really nice.
Yeah. Let's talk about why electricity is so expensive here. I was super curious. There's no nuclear, there's no hydroelectric on this island, which means fossil fuel is being cargo shipped in, burned.
Yeah.
And that's where the electricity comes in. So not only is it the whole operation of making electricity, but shipping it here, just like anything else, shipping on everything is outrageous. When you are low on seeds, we've tried to make it better for everybody on the island as far as shipping charges are concerned, and we're still looking at ways to make it better. But if you're having to basically ship in fossil fuels to burn, that's going to increase. If you get a bad lot of compost or a mispick of compost delivered to you, all the expenses go up.
Yep. Yeah, so last week we used the wrong media. We used something that was causing our greens to not really germinate well. And even if they germinated, there was some sort of, I want to call it an inhibition, where the seeds would just stay at the surface and not penetrate their roots into the soil very well. And then end up just burning on the surface and drying out on the surface. I would estimate our loss is about $3,000, maybe over $3,000. That stings for sure, especially when we're going out and looking for microloans of like the 10 to 15,000 range. 3,000 is a pretty big chunk of money.
Right.
So, that's frustrating, but that you have to assume that that's going to happen at some point. So nobody's immune to that, and that's farming.
And when it doesn't happen, it's not necessarily a bonus either. It's
no.
You didn't, just because you didn't spend a contingency, which you should think about always building in.
Yeah.
Where is that money best allocated, especially first so early on in the movement out to the land that you have. Like you said, you have the wash pack set up, you have living quarters set up, you have the first round of grows set up, and now you're looking at, okay, what's the next step? And then we've gone back and forth for months on these 2 high tunnels.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a question, is that really the next viable step for you?
Right. And so there's a constant back and forth that things swing because you start to unravel the big picture with more detail as time goes on. And the initial excitement of, we're getting this new property. Hey, Nick, I need some systems. Like, you're gonna buff us out with everything. And that concept was, in the beginning, really good for us because it gave me peace of mind that somebody was there to support us, regardless of if we were going to do it or not, or what it was going to look like.
Right.
Knowing that we could get that product when we needed it, which you obviously are there for us, was huge. And then in the end, all we bought from you so far is 1,000 trays, because our goal is to get to 1,000 microgreen flats per week, which I think is a nice moderate sized farm for microgreens. We're only halfway there, but that's the thing, is like, we've only been on the property for 6 months. We have plans to expand 3-4 times the footprint already. So that means there's potential that, hey, maybe down the road in the near future, we're going to order a high tunnel, as we've identified that, we need covering for our greens. So we'll be talking more for sure.
And look, even if you buy a high tunnel tomorrow, right, and it gets put up, that's a third microclimate that you're now having to deal with and learn.
Yep.
Now, I have no doubt that it would do wonderful for you, especially with some of the considerations that you and I can take into account of.
Well, it's too big. It's not even going to fit.
The hell of a thing, isn't it? when we start looking at shade options and roll-up side options and ventilation options, while still giving you the coverage that you're going to need on that side with a little bit of the excess rain, it's still going to be a learning curve.
Yeah.
And the product that comes out of the open air versus inside is going to be much different, which then you're going to have to start trialing out varieties. I'm sure that some are going to do better outside and some are going to do better inside. And in this case, and I want people to understand that when I say outside, I'm still talking covered. There's a lot of greenhouse elements that you've built in to your grow, even though it's outside.
Right.
You still have the rain protection. You have a little bit of wind protection, wildlife protection. You know, it's just a different structure.
Right. And so that is a good lesson. It's like, even if you were to buy stuff off the shelf, there's a learning curve to use that product as to its fullest potential.
And that's universal, whether it's here or in South Dakota or Maine.
Yeah.
It's all different.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing's perfect. And even those indoor growers, like, there's still a massive learning curve to growing indoor as well. That we're not going to get into detail about here, but every type of farming, every process, even when we got these new drying trays, it's like the drying trays had two sides to it. So you could flip it around. Do you stack it one way? Do you stack it another way? Do you build out tables that fit this drying rack, or the tray? And the answer is yes. But if you build out, systems for these new products, it's like your whole layout's going to look different. So every time you add something new, whether it's the high tunnel or even just these 10 by 20 flats, when we went for the 1 inch versus like a 2 inch or 3 inch flat, changed the way that everything was going. So yeah, adapting's key. And
then yesterday I asked if you were going to put landscape fabric down, and there was a debate amongst.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a super sore subject. I keep bringing it up.
It's hilarious.
But just the fact that yesterday you had somebody to bounce the idea about even which gravel to choose, because it's not a matter of does the landscape fabric go here, does the rock go there, but what kind of rock to use. I'm hoping should you finally decide to use the rock, that you're not going to misspend your money and get pea gravel that you're going to be rolling around on.
Right.
And that's hard to push a cart through. That crushed gravel, 3/4 of an inch. Anything smaller moves around. Anything larger is too rough.
Yeah.
So that 3/4 inch really packs down nice and makes a solid as a surface while still giving you a lot of area for drainage.
Yeah.
But all that stuff's going to take time.
Yeah. It all takes time, and it's also upfront costs. So we ran through the concept of weed matting or landscape fabricing the base of the greenhouse, which if you look at the base of this one house behind you, that's got landscape fabric. So we understood that it could be good, but we weren't all happy and didn't see the same vision. So at the end of the day, we decided to not do it. It saved us a few thousand on the front end. So not rushing into a decision to spend money in a way that maybe didn't net out what we wanted was the decision that we made. But in the end, could we go back in and re-gravel it? Absolutely. We could lay the weed mat down, get the gravel it. Now, it would be less than ideal to go and do it on the back end. But retrofitting systems is something that we're constantly doing anyway. So it's not new.
So you have happened to be my contact over the last 2.5 years or so, but I know this is a partnership, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how are you guys looking at internal leadership versus listening to the employees, listening to interns, taking all that into consideration as an owner who, by all accounts, could make the final decision?
Yeah.
What are some leadership skills you can pass on to people to listen to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big proponent of managers. Doesn't matter what type of manager you are. Managers and people just listening to the folks around them, above and below. If you're not listening to those people that are on the ground level doing the work, then you're missing some key information that can really help with your operation and keep your employees happy. Again, the people that are doing the work, you want to keep them happy. If they're not happy, they're not going to do your work. So that's the fundamental difference of places that succeed and don't succeed. And then listening to people that, you know, maybe are at your level. So my co-business partner, he's got a lot of good ideas, but they're totally different than mine. And so we come from two different backgrounds, and so we have two different viewpoints on the same subject matter all the time. Like I said in the beginning, the decision always falls like kind of in between, where my viewpoint's over here, his viewpoint's over here, our employees' viewpoint's over here, and we're picking something that hopefully satisfies most. You'll never satisfy all.
And that also includes the client. There's what they think it needs to be,
Yes.
or what it should be.
Yes.
And that's the true silent partner there, isn't it?
Well, it's that. So, and then there's the other partner, which is like our food safety folks that will tell you, hey, you got to use this secondary container on top of, you know, your bench. Keep it above the bench. Don't let it touch the wood. Okay, that's another step in the process, but
And a non-negotiable.
So, you know, and sometimes the price is your non-negotiable. So again, there are these silent deciding factors that are outside of, you know, your business partners, and so that sometimes is good, you know, because it alleviates the stress of trying to debate each other or battle each other to find the best solution, because the answer's already there.
If you're watching the video, you're gonna see a lot of the extra footage that we took during this talk. But if you're listening to it, let's describe the new land and just some of the features that I was super interested in. Have you expand on it? So again, this is the wettest part of the island, east side, windward side. It's in a pocket that has been developed. You're fairly close to the highway. I mean, we might as well call it ancient agricultural land.
It is, yeah.
Super narrow,
So
but surrounded by some pretty valuable assets in the water and the stream.
yeah, there's a lot of traditional Hawaiian agriculture going on, like kalo production, which is taro. And there's a lot of ulu there, or breadfruit. So two of the staple starches in Hawaii for Polynesians being produced there, and have been produced there for many, many, many years. So we're coming in the 9th inning, switching it up. But yeah, the land was developed for residential purposes, like I had said. So where there once was taro fields that was like all mud, there's now, you know, packed gravel. And that packed gravel was leveled so that there could be parking. Well, that's perfect. We're putting our microgreen facility right on top of that. So all of the work that was done in that development, we're putting to use since we're growing above ground. There's also somewhat good native soil there. We need to work on improving soil health. Essentially, we went in with the forestry mulcher, grinded down all this overgrowth, big mature trees. And when we first moved in, we wanted to recover some of that land for production, just so that we can start generating revenue while being in that space. And so, you know, short of waiting for all our systems to be built out, we ended up doing an in-ground soil plot. And that soil plot was where we put our first edible flowers. And again, sticking to the core crops, we needed edible flowers. If we were going to expand on one of our microgreen mixes that has edible flower in it, we figured we'd start with that variety of edible flowers that goes in that mix, so we can produce more of that microgreen mix. And that worked out really well. And then as we transition, we're considering, okay, you know, exposed, open air, edible flower production isn't the way that we want to go from a profitability standpoint or the labor standpoint. But, you know, you got to get the job done sometimes, and that's kind of how we went about it. So it's definitely going to evolve from here. The layout is super interesting. One or non-interesting. It's not interesting from the standpoint that it's literally a rectangle
Right.
with a road that goes down one side.
Thankfully to the side.
Yeah, thankfully to the side. Irrigation comes straight in from the county line down. We got really high pressure. So one of the first things that I checked out was our water pressure. We have an 1.5-inch line, so we have plenty of water flow. It was about 83 psi. So from a systems engineering standpoint, that's great. Yeah, we didn't need if anything, we put a reducer on it. We blew out a couple of plastic reducers and then figured out we needed one of the brass ones. So we choked it down to about 35 psi where we're running our overhead irrigators. These special sprinklers that we got for our greenhouse, and we're gonna probably copy that. And for our drip line in the future, we'll run it at the same. So that's been really nice. Electricity was there. We're working on getting solar. Maybe in a few years when you check back, we'll have solar. There's that REAP program right now, so it's a good time to invest in solar. Government's going to help you out there. So from a utility standpoint, we're blessed with water. We even have a spring that flows across our property. We have the electrical resources that we need. We had the living corridors, came with a house on the property. We did some minor improvements. We enclosed the garage. The garage then became our processing shed. And so when we looked at the property, those were the things that we were looking at as far as being a good investment. And we're happy that within 6 months, we're already producing. Within 6 months, we're already scaled up to double our footprint that was here. And we brought in partners that could take us to distribution to the different islands already. We've gone from producing about 200 clamshells in total per week to like 500 to 600 per week. So not only does it tell you our footprint doubled, but our production volumes actually doubled with the new microgreen facility. We said we applied a lot of the knowledge that we gained from this site, and we actually got twice the yield out in that site. So every flat that we produce, we try to get roughly 2, maybe 3 clamshells per flat. And then we try to average about $10 a clamshell. So you can do the math of like how much revenue we're generating. And it's always good to have that rough number in your head as you scale, because that's going to give you, again, your projections. And it takes some time to figure that out. But yeah, $10 a clamshell, roughly 2 to 3 clamshells a flat. If you're not meeting it, it's got to be a specialty green, and again, not every microgreen is produced the same way. I have basil over there that I could probably get 4 clamshells out of a tray, and then I have microcress on the other side, contrasting that, where I'll get 1. And so where do you price it? Well, that's up to you and up to your markets, but again, that's a good rough estimate of where we've gone with our production. And again, we're trying to get to 1,000 flats a week, which I don't know where that's going to take us, but our goal is to start working with big hotels, bigger accounts that haven't had the opportunity to work with local microgreens because there hasn't been a purveyor or a producer that could sustain that sort of relationship.
Let's talk a little bit about a conversation we had yesterday where starting to get hotel clients, already bagged a pretty significant one. And we talked about the difference between cost versus shipping it here versus locally grown with a smaller producer. And for a lot of people that's starting out, I see it over and over again. The tendency is to race to the bottom on price or be scared to have a little bit higher priced item, especially when you're going to a distributor or a wholesaler or any secondary market like a chef, just anything that you're not selling direct to the actual client. Right. And so the conversation, at least for here, was led to, yes, you're more dollars per ounce, but given the longevity of the product and they're not throwing away, half or more, the usage of the per ounce cost is actually cheaper, even though you're charging more.
Yeah. So the return on investment for the chef, you always want to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. If they're buying a equivalent clamshell of ours for $16 from the U.S. mainland, and that product is then going to go into the trash can in 3 days, maybe they're getting one serving out of it, as in like one handful, and then it's going bad, or it's already bad and they're returning it. I've spoken to multiple chefs and worked with multiple chefs that converted to us, and they say the same story. So what does that present? It presents an opportunity to work with these chefs with local microgreens, and our product might be priced, 50%, maybe even 100% more than our competitors in the U.S. mainland. But if our product's lasting more than twice as long, it's lasting like 4 times as long, these chefs, in their mind, there is no substitute at that point, because they're ordering one clamshell that can last them 3 weeks, and they're saving time and effort. They don't have to talk to us for 3 weeks. They can just order a set amount. They know they can trust the product. When they go into their fridge, they're not going into the fridge hoping it's going to be good. They go into it knowing it's good. And then the fact that we take that extra step, which we didn't disclose before, but we add a lot of value to our products just in the way that we process. And we wash all of our greens. And that fundamental step and a couple of other steps that we take are the point of difference in shelf life and the point of difference in the accessibility or in the chef's mind, the accessibility to our product, because they're then taking a product that out of the clamshell, whether it be the lettuce or the microgreens or the edible flowers, they're plating it straight out. And that is a beautiful thing for a lot of restaurants, because their whole thing is the same as ours, which is, hey, I'm a chef, I'm on a cut line, prepping stuff. I need to make sure that my greens and all my ingredients are in front of me and I can just use them. I don't want to go in, have to rewash the microgreen because there's a little dirt on it, and then plate it. So we're cutting out a lot of labor for our end user, and that goes into the quality of the green too, where we're really considerate of what height of the microgreen we're cutting it at. There's these minutia but very important details in quality that allow you to hit your price point where you're still competitive with what's available on the market.
Rarely do I visit a state that focuses so much on community, especially Native Hawaiian community. You being part of that ecosystem, you being part of something. Like I look at what you've done for the local economy just as far as my visit. We came with 7 people for the first week. You mentioned a pop-up event. We took 7 people to that pop-up event based off of that. The selection of restaurants that were going to be here while we're on island, that was one of the first things I asked you right before we came here is, hey, I need a list of places to go. Yeah. So you not only being highly aware of their needs and what's pushing them and driving them from a culinary standpoint, but just being a reference and being part of that community. I've, of course, have kept up with you over the years. I know you're highly involved in meeting with people and sitting in on lectures and going to things. So it's one of those, despite the expense, they're getting so much more in return that's intangible.
Yeah, I mean, it pays you well to do the things that don't pay you up front, right? So if you were to see our awesome intern over here, that's just one example of, like, you work with the kids give you good feedback. The kids also contribute to more agriculture production in the next generation. They solidify your market because they're growing up already having access to these things. They're pushing their friends to eat healthier. They're pushing their friends to get into food production, into science. And ultimately, if you think about another 10 years from now, that demographic is going to be either our customers, or they're going to be our workers, or they're going to be something tied to our business and our community. And then that's ultimately the fabric that we want to be.
Well, we joked yesterday that, when you first started out, you were the young farmer.
Yeah.
Now you're 5 years in.
Our body's beat.
Another 5 years, you're going to be the OG, you know, and these guys may have their own farms.
Can't grow facial hair, but yeah, I mean, I'll probably look young because I'm Asian, but you know, the reality is, yeah, in another 5 years, it's wild to think that there could be another 36 farmers that are even younger than myself with businesses, not just farming for other people, but with their own businesses.
Right.
There's a great program. I'm going to put them on blast. Go Farm Hawaii. It's through the university. They're training entry-level farmers with this entrepreneurship background and model, and they're really pushing them to think about ways that they can contribute to food production and food security, whether they have land, family land that's unused, or they're trying to go out and buy land like us or lease land like some of our friends. And they're giving them the education on, again, the practical farming side, the business side, the marketing side. And I think that's been exciting to watch. So things like that you want to be contributing to, you want to be listening to, you want to be a part of. I do lecture, you know, here and there for those types of groups. And then I also go and attend their conferences, their mini conferences, and other guest lectures, because what they're teaching the next generation can help you also, you know? So yeah, constantly educating yourself is huge.
Well, even just hearing you talk about the perspective of a line, you know, what it's like on the line of a restaurant shows you've done that homework as well.
Yeah, I mean, you want to put yourself in other people's shoes, whether you're training them or trying to train yourself. And if you understand the demographic that you're serving, which we're trying to serve a lot of demographics through farming and our products. Of course, it's healthy to eat greens. So the home buyer is an easy target. But in Hawaii, as far as like a business model goes, you have to serve the restaurants because they're going to give you the price point that you want. Again, it's not the entirety of what you do, hopefully. For us, we started entirely working with restaurants, but eventually evolving to where we could produce enough to feed the community. And that means our local community through direct sales or through, you know, our neighborhood grocery store, which is Foodland Farms for us. And so,
and which you're on every island.
Which are on every island, yeah.
Which is awesome.
But yeah, you want to know who you're serving and what they need. And part of that whole conversation of like, yeah, maybe go out and work for a kitchen one year. Yeah, or hope that you've already done that. That's
the most solid advice, dude. Like, if you want to sell to a chef, having that background experience, it's priceless. And it'll serve you for every year that you're in business.
Yeah. And another thing that's helped, and this is like just because I'm a social creature, is like make friends with the people that are up and coming young chefs. If you're an up and coming young farmer, make friends with people that you can grow the rest of your lifetime with. It's kind of like, I don't know, I think about this all the time. So I'm going to throw this guy under the bus. We have a really old bookkeeper and we have a really old lawyer that helps us on our farm. I think I made a bad decision to go with some older guys because they're just a few shakes away from retirement. They don't have that sort of burning desire to create and shape things as much as they would have in their, you know, earlier career. But I know I made that mistake this year because I started to, again, think about ways that we can really form good relationships that are going to span the test of time and have the longevity that we want. It starts with people in your own circle and then working your way out. Younger people that think the same way, that are maybe doing things in parallel to what you're doing. They don't have to be farmers. They could be businessmen. They could be lawyers. They could be activists. They could be conservationists. Heck, they could be educators. And then if you partner with all of those people in your community, it solidifies what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then also just creates brand awareness, and it's good PR. Like, and one thing for us is like, we're just going and doing it and then promoting it. We're not promoting to do just a little bit of education. We're doing the education first with these guys, and then if we can promote it after, we will. So it has to be authentic as well. It can't just be like all for business. It's genuinely for training the next generation, getting people to buy into this lifestyle, because it is part of being sustainable on the island.
Well, I think in no way does that fully catch up the story of the last couple of years and where you guys are at, but got to wrap this up at some point. So you're at the new place, you're there 6 months. There's a lot of stuff on the horizon for you. If you had to make any predictions what the next year is going to look like, what does that look for you?
Okay, so we're mid-year 2023. We just came out of the pandemic, and we're no longer wearing masks, so that's awesome. You can see
you guys aren't.
Smile.
a lot of masks.
Yeah, and yeah, we're seeing the sort of like aftermath of what the COVID really brought to places, and there's definitely an economic downturn. There's definitely more social issues. So where I see us going with this farm is we're evolving to meet the needs of the community. The community needs accessible greens. We are largely inaccessible with our price points being so high with specialty greens. So evolving our products to focus on things that the home buyer can easily access and use in their daily lives to have better nutrition, to feel better about themselves. So our microgreen mixes, those 4 mixes that we created, we're going to continually build more. But ultimately, we're going to pick ones that are economically viable for us to produce in mass quantities, bring the price down, get into all the big grocers, and ultimately feed people, again, these highly nutritious greens. And we'll get to that footprint of, at the new farm, scaling out with the entire front yard being greenhouse. And we'll get to the 1,000 tray count or more, maybe 1,200, 1,500 trays a week. And I really see us in the future looking at different properties to scale different types of agriculture. So microgreens was a way that, again, going back to like the very start, it was a way that we funded our business. But the vision was never to do microgreens. The vision was to produce food. What do we need? We need more starches. We need more things that will actually feed the community, or we're not going to go hungry. So proteins, doing more aquaponics. That's an awesome source of protein. Doing more of our breadfruit, our taro. So ultimately, the goal is to be able to do those things that don't make as much money, but provide sustenance to the community. And that's going to be in like the 10-year phase. So in the next year, it's really getting to that scale of our microgreen operation that'll get us to then the bigger picture. And I think that's going to be awesome. In another year or two, we'll have a good conversation about, where it's gone, and hopefully we'll be successful in our mission.
No doubt. No doubt. No, we don't waste our time talking to people who's not going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're hard-headed, right? You guys are all hard-headed. If you're into farming, you're going to be hard-headed. People are going to tell you you're not going to make money, but you're going to do it anyway. So if you're going to do it, there's no failure. And if you make a mistake, that's part of learning. Ultimately, you're just going to keep going, and you should never give up unless you're going to help other farmers, like how Nick has. I think if you give up the actual farming, you move on to another type of service that can help people produce food.
That's one thing we always keep an eye out is how many different ways you can serve in and through ag. Yeah. Not just in the growing or the supplying or the telling of the stories of it or the research of it. I mean, there's so many things that factor into how do we push the ball forward together.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I said, like, make friends with the people in your communities that are like-minded, that work parallel with what you're doing, because you might be one of them in the future.
Right.
But you got to lean into those partners. And the business, going back to the first video, the business isn't anything without the community interest. They're your buyers, they're your supporters, they're your fans. They're literally they're what makes your business viable. So you need to, again, it's a lifetime partnership with the community like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the farm is never for us. It's always for somebody else.
Yeah. And we're all, this will be the last thing I say.
We always say that.
I think a lot of farmers are dreamers. So, and I consider myself one. But if we're all dreamers and we're dreaming these big lofty things and we shoot for the stars and on the moon kind of a thing, ultimately you're still doing good, even if you fall a little bit short of where your loftiness is. So that's the takeaway, is like, I wanted to be on a 10-acre farm with probably thousands of flats of microgreens and tons of aquaponics and producing hundreds of pounds of fish, thousands of pounds of fish. In reality, I barely scrape by to get one property. It's going to be a lifetime of mortgage, and the uphill battle of producing, even with the climate changing and even with costs of doing business going sky high because of shipping and fuel costs and all that stuff. So again, it's just like, keep your head up, and it's a reminder to myself, keep your head up and keep driving, and you'll never quit if you have that vision.
Man, we're looking forward to the next time we get to come out and see you again. I can't wait to see the property. It's been unreal.
Yeah, man. Good to have you.
Love you, man.
Right on, man.